Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Figma live stream. I'm designer advocate Tom Lowry at Figma. I am flying solo this week because Josh is on a much deserved vacation, so it's just me today. So it's going to be a little hard to man the chat and answer questions and also do the stream at the same time, so forgive me. But today we're going to do a little bit of a shorter stream, and we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into Zeroheight. So if you've never used Zeroheight before, it is a product that has been built with a Figma integration to help you document your design system really quickly and maintain a live connection to all of the stuff that you're building in Figma. So we've talked to a lot of small teams that maybe don't always have the engineering resources to sort of like brew up their own documentation website. And Zeroheight makes it really easy to do that. So here I am, I'm at zeroheight.com, and you can sort of like get an idea or overview of the product. They have a free plan that you can try. And basically what it allows you to do is connect everything that's going on in Figma and then bring it over into an easy to configure documentation website where you can have live code samples and embeds from your Figma file, images from your Figma file, bring in all of your styles like your colors and type styles and your shadows, and be able to make that available to other people that you're collaborating with on your team. So what I'm going to do is get started and show you how you can use the product. I'm not going to go into every single detail, but hopefully this is useful for some of you. So I'm going to flip over to a different tab here, and you'll see that I'm logged in. And the first thing that you have the ability to do is create a style guide. And at the top, there's also another tab called Uploads. So your uploads are essentially where you would make the connection with your Figma file and what's going on in Zeroheight. So if we click the Add Upload button, you can choose Figma, and then this is where you put in the link to your Figma file. So typically here, you would put in a link to a library where you're housing all of your styles or components, but it's not limited to just one file, so you can add multiple uploads. So if you've got some of your colors in one file and some of your components in another file, however you've decided to structure your libraries, you can add all of those, and then you can pull from them as you're building out all the pages to your documentation website. So right now, if we go to one of our files in Figma, you can see here I've got this file open called Material Components, and I've got a page called UI Components, which contains all sorts of things that we'd use in our UI organized into different categories. So I've got a frame here for my buttons, I've got a frame here for toolbars, etc. All sorts of different components. And then on the icons page, I've got very much a similar setup, except I've got all of my icons organized into categories that just make them a little easier to browse. So action icons, image icons, and all of these are coming from one of our UI kits that's available on figma.com/resources. This is sort of the Material 1.0 kit. As part of that kit, you get all these components and then all of the material icons available to you. So all we have to do here is hit the share button, and we can copy the link. And then when we go back to Zeroheight, we can paste in that link. Now, one thing that you can probably do here is you'll notice that we add this little URL parameter to the URL that you copy, and all that does is basically direct somebody to either a selected frame or the page that you're sharing, so that you're sharing the same view with somebody else. In this case, you don't really need that. You can get rid of it, and so now we're just linking to the file, and then we hit the Add File button. This is going to take a few seconds, and what it's going to do is it's going to pull in a listing of all the stuff that exists in that file. So you can see now that that's done, it's pulled in 1,121 components, 14 textiles, 260 frames, so more or less just those organizing containers that we were looking at, and then all of the different color and effect styles. So once you have those in Zeroheight, you can actually like pull out all of those and organize them into pages, and that's sort of like where the style guide creation process comes in. So if we flip over to Style Guides, you'll see here there's a button to create a style guide. And if we click it, it actually starts with giving us like a template that we can start populating with stuff. And there's already some categories and pages that have been created for common things like colors, typography, layout. And you can customize these however you want. So let's just say we want to call this Fig Material Style Guide. And then we can upload a logo. So I've got a Figma logo ready to go. And you can see, like I mentioned, that there's some pages that you can populate. So all you have to do is like click on these pages. You can also like reorder them, because this will basically, this will become like your sidebar navigation when you actually browse the documentation website. And there's all sorts of like really easy to use features, like being able to add like tab navigation to each of these pages. And on every page, there's a little plus button where you can add different types of content blocks. So if you wanted to have a video embed, an image, a table, a code snippet, or even those things that are going to come from your Figma file, you can add all of those here. One really nice thing is that when you add things like headings, so like if we add a heading here called welcome, let's say, you'll see that welcome gets added as another nav item. So any of like your H1s will get added as an easy to navigate item that falls within whichever page or category you're working with. And by clicking this button, you can add other categories, and then you can add pages within each of those categories. So let's go and see how we can pull some stuff from Figma in. So if we go to colors, the default template here shows that we have primary colors, secondary colors. You can delete some of this just by hitting like the trash cans icons if you don't want them. We're going to keep the secondary heading. Let's say we call this black plus gray, and then we have all of our primary colors. And you'll see that one of the default content type blocks that is sitting here as a placeholder is this design uploads content block. So if we were to delete this, we could create this ourselves just by clicking on the plus button and then clicking on design uploads. And then what that gives you the ability to do is click here, and it's going to give you a list of all of the files that you've connected. And you can dive into each one of those files, and then you can actually look for the things that you want to add. So in our case, we want to add colors, and we're going to add all of these baseline colors. So let's just say we want to add all of these. We could select the whole folder, but I'm going to go through the manual process of selecting them all. And then once you've selected them, all you have to do is add them, and it automatically creates all of these swatches. And the nice thing is that you get hex values, and you get RGBA values. And so if you add, let's just create one more block for some of those black and gray colors. So I think we've got like a couple black and gray colors here, and you'll see these ones actually have opacity values. So we've got black 54% and 87%. And another cool thing is that they give you like an 8-digit hex value as well, in addition to the RGBA value. So once you have created these, you can also, there's these little drag handles, so if you want to reorder them, that's really easy to do. It's a really intuitive interface. If there's colors that you want to delete, you can remove them. And then for each of these colors, that you can also add notes. I believe when you're in Figma as well, if we go back out to these styles, if you go into edit one of these styles and add a description, I believe those descriptions get pulled in as well. I know they do on components. But basically, once you have all of these imported in, then you can add other blocks, like if you wanted to add some text, some text to describe how you would use the primary color palette. You can do that as well. If you decided down the road that you wanted to add different headings, you can also take these things and then drag them into different sections if you wanted to do that as well. So really easy to customize. Let's go look at a different type. Let's go look at typography. So in typography, again, this is sort of broken down by default into having a header and body. You may decide to organize these, have different headings for desktop and mobile. I'm not going to add any subheadings right now. So what I'll do is I'll just click on this block again to add my design uploads. And then I can go into, collapse this and go into my text style. So I'm going to bring them all in, so I could just check this box at the text style. It's going to bring in all 14 of them. And then what you'll see is it creates a preview. And the preview is actually an image-based preview that is generated from whichever font that you've used. And the nice thing about that is it doesn't require the person to have the font installed to get a preview of what the font looks like, which is really nice. And then over here you get all of the properties. And you'll notice that when you hover over the properties, much like the colors, you can copy all of these values, which makes it really easy for developers to get some of these values if they're building, like some style sheets or some styling in their own sort of like developer style guide or SCSS file or whatever language that you're deciding to use, which is something I'll touch on a little bit later. So that's how easy that is. Again, these are much like some of the other content blocks where you can reorder them if you want or move them under different headlines. The next one I'm going to show is how we could do some icons. Again, I'm going to structure this page a little differently and just delete some of these headings. And I think what I'll do is I'm going to add some tabs. So if we go back to our file here, you'll notice that we had these different categories. So action, image, social, content, AV, device, etc. Those are all the different categories of icons. And we're going to try to like keep some of that. So if we go back to Zeroheight, we can add tabs for all of those. So we can call this action, and we could add another tab called alert, and we could add another tab called AV. And then on each one of those tabs, we can add a design upload block. And we could actually bring in all those components. And you'll see that Zeroheight groups all of those components into whichever frames that you have them in, almost like folders. So if we want to bring in all those action items, action icons, we can do that. And you'll see here you're getting a little notification to tell you how many have been added. You can go and do the same thing for the alert icons. I'm not going to go through this and do them for all, and they will take a couple minutes to populate all of the image previews of them. And then while that's happening as well, you'll see that it's generating all the images. If you want like a little bit more information density to show all these icons, you can adjust this little slider to basically change the scale of each of these items. So that's going to take a second to generate. And then we can also do other types of components. So for instance, buttons. So this is the type of component where you may actually want to add some code samples. But let me just go in. I'm just adding more elements to those design blocks. So you can see here we've got some buttons, I believe, in here. Where are my buttons? I missed them. Buttons. And we've got 3 different types of buttons. So we've got raised buttons, which are kind of like primary buttons, flat buttons, which are secondary buttons, and then floating action buttons. So let's bring in the raised buttons. There's 4 different states of them. So we'll check this box off. And what's nice is it's going to do the same thing. And you'll see the component descriptions get brought in here as well. So the nice thing is that for a lot of this content, you can kind of maintain it in Figma and then just keep it updated in Zeroheight by resyncing with the Figma file without actually having to manually do this. And we can reorder these. Again, we can also change the scale of them, much like the icons. If we go back to the icons page, some of those images are probably finished loading. Yeah, and you can see now we have a full gallery of all these images that people can click on. And in this particular case, there's not much to see here, but they can get a few more specs. But we can add descriptions, links if you want to link to, for certain components, you want to link to something in your code repository, you have the ability to do that as well. If we go back to the buttons, I think those image previews should be updated as well. And you can see now we have all of our different button states, and we can edit the descriptions, add notes. And as I mentioned before, we can also add code snippets. So if we were to go down here, here's a few different things. If you had React components or something in Storybook, you could do a Storybook embed, or you could add a code snippet just to show how somebody might use this component in code, so that you can synchronize all of this in one documentation website. You can also have a live preview, almost like a code pen where you have an HTML, a CSS, and a JavaScript component, and then users will be able to interact with that component on the page. Whereas this is just focused a little bit more on markup. But let's just say, I don't know, you had like some sort of like JSX React component, and this one was going to be button raised. You could add that to the page so that it was easy for people to understand how to use this in code. And another cool feature that Zeroheight has is design tokens. And so what this will do If you're not familiar with tokens, there's a nice little diagram that gets pre-populated on this page, which you can obviously remove. But the idea of tokens is that you're going to take all of these different parameters of your design system. It could be things like border radiuses and colors and type styles, and kind of list them in a platform agnostic way, and then have Zeroheight, or there's other software that you can use to do this as well, which will compile those tokens down into formats that other languages will use so that they're easier to maintain. That way they don't all have to be individually maintained. And so what's cool is that Zeroheight, from your colors and your type styles, will build out this list of variables based on the names that you've given them and assign them either hex values or RGBA values. And it will give you mix-ins for all of your type styles, which are basically made up of the font family, the font size, the letter spacing, line height, font weight, and the color. And that way they're easy for you to use in code. And then you can also switch this preview to show you like either Sass, CSS, or iOS with Swift. And in this case, it breaks the Swift code down into separate code blocks for colors and text styles. And then you can also do the same thing for XML with Android. So this is a really nice feature. And talking to Jerome, one of the people that's building Zeroheight, it sounds like this is a feature that they want to enhance. And I think another area of Zeroheight that they're also working to build out is when you're in the style guide and you click on one of your components, you can inspect these things as well, just to get a little bit more properties. And it sounds like there's more coming there too. So anyways, really cool product, really easy to use. You can see how quickly you can start building this out. And once you've done all that categorization and imported all of your components, you can actually visit the website. So if we go preview, it's going to give us a style guide website that we can share with our team to navigate. And you can see we can navigate to all those different sections. We can go to our icons page. Excuse me. And we can browse all of the different icons. So anyways, hopefully that was a useful tool for anyone that wants to quickly build a style guide website. The address is zeroheight.com. And in future episodes, hopefully we'll do a bit more coverage on some other ways to document your design system in Figma, but also some of our other integrations. Anyways, thanks so much for joining me today, and hopefully this was useful. And as always, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter and let us know if there's any other topics that you would like to see us cover in future episodes on these live streams. And Josh and I will work together and try to make that happen. We've also got some exciting stuff planned, so stay tuned. And thanks so much for joining.